Man, what is happening, my YouTube family? Of course, it is your boy B New. I'm coming at you on this Monday. First and foremost, as always, just want to wish everybody positive vibrations and blessings. Hope everybody have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. And there's been a lot to talk about in the news in the world of sports, man. Quite a bit going on. Of course, we all know we had the fight this weekend with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. It was an easy way to make some money if you actually knew boxing, but it pains me to say that I didn't make any money on it because I just couldn't bring it to myself to bet against Deontay Wilder, the bronze bomber. I think he showed a lot of heart, and I hate the way people roasted him up the way they did, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Sometimes you just meet your match, and this is clearly a case of that. I think maybe if he would have stuck to his game plan of going to the body like he did early, I think he just exerted way too much energy in the opening rounds with a lot of shots he was trying to take to get the knockout punch, but didn't land. And once you didn't land, you exert so much energy that you become exhausted. And when you're exhausted and you start to take blows, and then you got somebody that's 50 or 60 pounds heavier than you, laying on you and just putting all their weight on you, is going to keep on continuing to tire you out. He had a chance, I think, when he put him down twice in I believe the 6th round, but that was more to me of Fury just trying to get a break after he had been, hurt, and understanding that he could still get up, recover, and finish the fight. But really, I think the ref let the fight go on too long, because once Deontay Wilder came out in that 11th round, I just didn't think he had anything left in the tank. Hell, his knees was pretty much wobbly, and he didn't look to be nowhere near 100% of himself. But anyway, that's not the boxing channel, but we do touch on all sports, anything sports. Some good football games that went on over the weekend. Of course, my 2 Tennessee teams won, the Titans and the Vols, so hey, we good on that. But anyway, I apologize for not. I think I should have came back, I want to say Thursday or Friday. It's just been real hectic. I've been having a lot of things on my plate to do, so I do apologize, but here I am back at you. I want to continue that list, and I know there's a lot of things going on in the NBA too. As far as the Lakers and people saying the preseason and what all that looks like. I'm not one to get overly hyped about preseason. I know Westbrook has had a lot of turnovers and, whatever, but that's something we've known about Westbrook for a long time. So if you find that to be surprising, then you just don't know what type of player Russell Westbrook is. But the thing is going to be is how they're all going to mesh together, and the Lakers haven't even showed you that. They've had AD and Westbrook. They've had AD, LeBron and Westbrook. They have had, but not a combination of all three. And plus, they're not even playing the entirety minutes of the game. And like LeBron said, the preseason he take practice more serious than preseason, because then that's how you learn how to execute, especially situational plays in the game, drawing up plays for certain situations, being aware of what's going on at all times, and just really planning for another team, especially if you're practicing and you've been watching video preparing for an upcoming opponent, which is a lot more important than preseason, which pretty much in basketball is just to get you kind of in shape and get your lungs and your wind ready to be able to endure such a gauntlet of a season. But with all that being said, y'all, I know on my last 2 shows, we talked about Paul Pierce, we talked about Ray Allen, we talked about Reggie Miller, we talked about Giannis, Harden, David Robinson. So we really got into some great ones, some of the all-time greats with the list. So now we are at number 20. And this one, he's one of my favorite players, even though when I watched him play, he was well over his prime at this point when I watched him play. But we're going to talk about the great Moses Malone. Moses Malone, who comes in 20th on my list, who for his career averaged 21 points a game and 12 rebounds, a block and a half, and a steal a game. So you talking about somebody who's going to go out there and get you 21 and 12 every night. A lot of players, power forwards and centers, would love to be first name 20, last name 10, just for a game, much less for a season. But this is what he averaged for his career. Now, you got to think he would have averaged a lot more points if you take it to his prime. If you take it to his prime, he would have got a lot more points, because he hung around all the way into 95, y'all. He started playing in 75. So he hung around 20 years, and You know, those last few years, I think he jumped from Atlanta, maybe Milwaukee, San Antonio, and he was only averaging about 8 or 9 points a game during those last final years. So if you take those averages out and you look at him during his peak and his prime, he was giving you about 25 to 26 a game, 26 and 12 every day. Now, also, if you look at it like this, you know, Dr. J was a great player. And we all know, and we'll get into Dr. J later, because perhaps he could be on my list. He could be on my list. But as we all know, Dr. J never won that championship in the NBA until Moses Malone was acquired from the Houston Rockets and came on over to the Philadelphia 76ers, which made them an instant contender and a winner of a championship very, very instantly. And you know, they beat an all-time great team in that Lakers team in the finals. So that just shows you the dominance of a one Moses Malone. And Moses Malone did win the Finals MVP in 1983. And what really puts him on the list, and you might want to say the person that I had next on the list at number 19, you could really argue that they could be swappable. It just all depends on how you look at the accolades. But like I said, I didn't watch a lot of his play myself compared to who's next on the list, which I'll get to in a minute. But I did watch a lot of his career in the early years when he definitely won the championship, but I was very young at that time. But I do remember the dominance of Moses Malone and even Willis Reed too. But at the end of the day, he's a 12-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 4-time first team. So you're talking about 8-time All-Team, you know, playing that position in that era, and you 8-time All-NBA. He was a 6-time rebounding champion. That means you leading the league in rebounds for 6 different seasons. He was so great of a player, his jersey was retired by 2 different franchises, which would make you wonder about LeBron. Will he be retired by different franchises? Will his jersey be retired? Who knows? But he was retired by the Philadelphia 76ers. His jersey was retired, and of course the Houston Rockets, because we all know how close he came with winning the championship with Houston, but just was not able to get it done. And if you think about it, his scoring prowess, if you include the ABA, because, you know, when I had to factor into this, I do have to factor into ABA, because even though this is the NBA countdown, he played 3 or 4 years in the beginning when he was really going out dominating, was in the ABA. And the ABA really had just as not, if not better, competition than the NBA. And if you count him as far as scoring all time, including the ABA and NBA and not just the NBA, then you're talking about he is 9th all time in scoring. So you're talking about a top 10 scorer that was going out and getting you 21 and 12 a game, who has a finals MVP, who is a 3-time MVP. You know, I don't think it's much more that you can say about Moses Malone. So I know a lot of you guys, especially people who watch this channel, it's in their 20s, most of you all, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you know, go check out Moses Malone to see how dominant of a player he was and what he brought to the table, and how when he teamed up with Dr. J in the early 80s, they were able to win that championship and to compete for much more in the battles that they had in the Eastern Conference against Larry Bird and Kevin McHale in the East. I mean, I tell you what, the 80s was a lot deeper and better than the 90s. I'm just going to be honest with that. But anyway, moving right along, we're going to go ahead and talk about number 19. Number 19, who is none other than Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett, who will be remembered by many as the great Boston Celtic. I remember him as a great Boston Celtic and Minnesota Timberwolf. But at the end of the day, he was going against, when he was in the West with Minnesota, which, you know, maybe he should have pulled a LeBron move. You want to talk so bad about LeBron. He had a no-trade clause, but he stayed with Minnesota for how many years? 12, 13 years with Minnesota to do what exactly? The best they can get you was a Latrell Sprewell and a Sam Cassell. You know, and you still competed. You made it to the Western Conference Finals. Kevin Garnett is great. And when you talk about the accolades, you might say Moses Malone should be ahead of Kevin Garnett because he's a 3-time NBA MVP, whereas KG is only a 1-time NBA MVP. But at the end of the day, Kevin Garnett was so totally skilled as far as what he can do with the basketball, the way he can handle the basketball, what he brought to the table defensively. And I feel like if Kevin Garnett would have actually had better talent surrounding him, he should have 4 or 5 NBA championships, because that's the top quality power forward that he was, you know, in the NBA. in my honest opinion. And, you know, if you look at his career-wise, he didn't quite average what Moses Malone averaged as far as point-wise. You know, he only averaged 18 points a game, but you got to think he averaged 10 rebounds, 1 block, and 1 steal a game, too. And he is number 21 all-time in scoring for the NBA. But I think what really made me put him over Moses, because I was like, tit for tat, like, and it could go either way, is that, you know, Kevin Garnett, you know, he was an NBA champion. He was not the NBA Finals MVP, which he could have been, but he was part of that three-headed monster with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, which either of them could have won that Finals MVP. But you got to realize Boston probably could have won 3 championships with Kevin Garnett when they were there. But if Kevin Garnett got hurt and they went down to Orlando, because if not, then you'd have been looking at Boston and LA 3 years in a row. Kind of the the great 80s rivalry that they used to have. But you got to realize Kevin Garnett is a 9-time All-NBA. Can't really say that about Moses Malone, even though he did have some competition at that center position. But you talking about 9-time All-NBA. That means for 9 years, you were top 1 or 2 best at your position in the entire association. And this is kind of really what made me put him over Moses Malone, because Moses Malone didn't have any, even though he was a monster on the boards, you know, he wasn't just the best rim protector and defensive player, because Kevin Garnett gave you all of that. And Kevin Garnett, this is what made me put him over him, is that Kevin Garnett is a 9-time All-NBA first team. 9-time All-NBA first team defense. Not second team, not third team, but first team. So that means you are out there playing defense at the best at your position 9 years. I mean, that is amazing. And Kevin Garnett in his own right, while Moses Malone was a 6-time rebounding champion, shoot, Kevin Garnett was a 4-time rebounding champion in his own regard. So I just think as far as defensive prowess, what KG was able to do, you know, leading a franchise like Minnesota, who we all know has always been abysmal, leading a franchise like Minnesota to the Western Conference Finals and deep in the playoffs in most years, but going up against a lot better team like the Kobe and Shaq Lakers and the Tim Duncan and Tony Parker Spurs. It was just a little bit too much for Kevin Garnett, but I got him right there at number 19. Now, let's go and keep it going. So now we're going to go to number 18. At number 18, I have none other than John Stockton. John Stockton, a lot of you might think I should have John Stockton higher, but there's a reason why I have John Stockton ranked where he is. A lot of you youngsters, I'm pretty sure you know about John Stockton as far as, you know, the 2 finals in which he played against Michael Jordan, you know, the Utah Jazz against the Bulls in 97 and 98. But let me just put it to you like this. John Stockton, he only averaged 13 points a game, but for his career, he averaged 11 assists a game. And this is a point guard job to run the offense and get his teammates involved. And John Stockton only did that, but he gave you 2 steals a game, damn near. And if you think about it, a lot of people say, well, he had Karl Malone, and I take that into account. That's why there's going to be some other point guards that I actually have ahead of John Stockton, even though John Stockton is number 1 all-time in assists. And I know that's the job of a point guard, but he's number 1 all-time in assists, and he's number 1 all-time in steals. And the closest person to him in assists, he got in assists, John Stockton has 15,800 assists. Jason Kidd is number 2 with 12,000 assists. 12,100 assists for Jason Kidd. And then you're talking about steals, it's the same way. But you do have to look at this. John Stockton played a total of 18 years in the NBA, and only 3 seasons did he not play all 82 games, which that's amazing. Hell, that might need to bump him up, just to be honest, because I don't care if you can say plumber, you can say whatever the hell you want to. In the NBA, it's going to be rigorous to play an 82-game season, regardless of whatever era you're talking about. And this man, for 15 years, played all 82 games. And then the other 3 years, he played damn near 82, which I think 97, he only played like 54, 55 games. But at the end of the day, John Stockton, number 1 all-time in assists, nobody near him. Number 1 all-time in steals, nobody near him. Now, he was teamed up with Karl Malone, who did enhance his greatness, and they made each other better, no doubt. But at the end of the day, Stockton was very clutch. He had a high percentage as far as shooting the free throw, and a high percentage as far as shooting threes, even though threes were, not really taken nearly as much as they are taken today. But you got to think about it as well. John Stockton is a 10-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 2-time first team, 5-time All-NBA defensive second team. He never made All-NBA defensive first team, but he did make All-NBA second team. He did make All-NBA second team. So with that being said, he could not get over the hump against Michael Jordan in those 2 years and be able to win a championship. And I will say, out of all the teams that Michael faced, the Utah Jazz, I would say, is probably the strongest team that they face, and having those two Hall of Fame players on the team with John Stockton and Karl Malone, who are two great all-time players, but they just weren't able to get it done because, as you know, the 97 and 98 team was two Hall of Famers, but they was going against three Hall of Famers, and Dennis Rodman, Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen, and four if you count Tony Kukoc. But I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame, but I mean, he's a great player, but I won't get into all that. But at the end of the day, John Stockton, you know what? Is he better? Is he better than, let's just say, the next person I have on my list? I don't really think so. And that's why I had this next person on my list, because although John Stockton was that great, you have to realize even when the Bulls were gone and Jordan was retired for those year and a half during, 94, 95, 95, 96 season, is they couldn't get past some of the other teams, like the Houston Rockets at that time. So he had plenty of opportunities to compete for a championship, but just was never able to get it done, although he did have some decent talent around him. And I don't care who else you put around, even though they did have the likes of Jeff Hornacek and some other great players that was okay, but at the end of the day, they weren't able to get it done. And I know rings aren't everything, and that is a team accomplishment, but when it comes to all-time greats, you still have to put that in there. You have to put some of that in there, because you got to have the will and the desire, and usually if you're in the finals, it's a great team against another great team. So it's just not like one great team against a trash team. So that being said, the person who I have coming in at 17, which I actually had two players today tied at number 17. Two players that's tied at number 17, because I'm going to have to give you guys next time 16 through 10. But I just had to do this, and I hate to have two ties like that. And I guess I could have threw it in and made a top 33 list. But that was just seeming kind of oddball, because as I was doing this, I was thinking about players that was actually not mirror images of the other players, but kind of brought to the table the same thing that these other players brought to the table. You understand what I'm saying? And with that being said, let's talk about the great Isaiah Thomas, who I have tied at number 17 with somebody else who I will not just mention just yet. But Isaiah Thomas, he's 9th all-time in assists. And you might wonder why I have Isaiah Thomas ahead of John Stockton. When John Stockton is number 1 all-time in assists, Isaiah Thomas is 9th all-time in assists. Isaiah Thomas is 18th all-time in steals. John Stockton is number 1 all-time in steals. But let's think about this. Isaiah Thomas played 12 years in the league. John Stockton played 18 years in the league. So some of those, and a lot of those statistics, if Isaiah wouldn't have, ruptured the Achilles and then hurt the ankle and hurt the finger and everything else that he was going through in that last year in '93, then he could have got out a couple of more years and been successful. But at that point, his body, being the small man that he was, and stayed getting beaten up in that much more physical Eastern Conference. The Western Conference was still more finesse at that time, the same way it is now. But in that more physical Eastern Conference, his body just couldn't take anymore. And the reason why I have Isaiah Thomas in front of John Stockton is, if you take Isaiah Thomas and you put him on that Utah Jazz team with Karl Malone, just be serious. See, think about it. That Utah Jazz team could not get past Chicago. Isaiah Thomas's Pistons spanked Chicago multiple times before Chicago ever started winning championships, and we all know that. And you can say, oh, well, Detroit was such a great team. Isaiah Thomas ran that team and made them great. That he was the leader who made that team tick. I'm just letting you know all of that. And you got to realize, Isaiah Thomas, they went to he led that Detroit Pistons team to 3 finals in a row. But you have to realize the two times before he got to the finals, if you go back to 86, 87, 87, 88, they was going Eastern Conference Finals with the great Larry Bird every time. With the great Celtics teams every time. Toe to toe. That was Isaiah Thomas. And you want to say the Detroit team was great. Okay, they had Joe Dumars. He was great. They had Mark Aguirre, John Sally, Bill Laimbeer, Vinnie Johnson. I mean, these players are not just all-time great players. They were good players, but it was Isaiah Thomas who made these players better. And he led with his toughness, and the way he played the game of basketball was really, almost unprecedented as somebody at his size doing what he was doing as far as going to the hole, playing perimeter defense, shooting the ball out on the perimeter, making timely shots. And like I was saying, his team, leading that Piston team, is what they beat the Celtics. They the ones who stopped the Larry Bird reign. They stopped Larry Bird reign. It wasn't Michael Jordan's Bulls who stopped the reign. Michael Jordan's Bulls finally got past the Pistons, but the Pistons had already vanquished the Celtics. And the Celtics still had something left in the tank when Isaiah Thomas was vanquishing them. They had something left in the tank, but at the end of the day, it was the passing of the torch from the Celtics on to the Detroit Pistons. And y'all forgive me about this train. I know it might be loud, so I'm gonna try to talk over that. But so it was him that led that. It was him that led that team. And like I said, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals 86, 87, 88, and then finally was able to beat the Boston Celtics. And then, of course, we all know they went on to play the Lakers in the finals and lost in 88. Then they went on to play the Lakers in the finals and actually swept the great Lakers in the finals, swept the Lakers in the finals in 89. Then, of course, they faced the Portland Trail Blazers in 90-91, and they were able to defeat the Portland Trail Blazers. So if you think about it, that run that Isaiah Thomas went on right there, if you exclude, you saying the Eastern Conference Finals, another Eastern Conference Finals, going against Larry Legend and the Boston Celtics, then beating them, and then the following year going to the finals and losing in 7 against the Lakers team, which, I'm sorry for all my Lakers fans out there, that could have been another way. I think the Pistons very well could have been a 3-peat team, because think about it. After they lost to the Lakers in Game 7, what did they do to the Lakers the next year? They swept the Lakers the following year, and then they went on to blast Portland the following year after that. So that could have been three finals victories in a row, but it just wasn't meant to be, because that Game 7, Isaiah Thomas pretty much sprained his ankle. If you go back and look at that Game 6, when he hobbled around on that ankle with the blood running through his socks and his ankle being this fat, and just playing on that ankle to the very end and putting up 40 points, doing what he had to do. And then they just had the call against Kareem, where him and Magic still argue to this day about, was that a phantom call on Kareem that put Kareem to the line with 3 seconds left in the game to win the game when they called it a foul. In my honest opinion, I really don't think it was much of a foul, but that's what gave the Lakers that victory. Well, that's actually what put them on to Game 7. And once they got to Game 7, Isaiah Thomas's ankle was way too hurt for him to even play and put any kind of pressure on him. By that Game 7, he was just playing off all adrenaline in Game 6 on the damn near fractured ankle that he was playing on. So the reason why I have Isaiah Thomas in front of John Stockton is because I don't think he had a great team at Utah, to be honest. And I know he put out Jordan, and that team put out Jordan, as Jordan was starting to become his own and become the great player that Michael Jordan is and was. But at the end of the day, I just don't really feel like that I don't feel like that John Stockton really did what he had to do to be able to be in front of Isaiah Thomas. And I know rings are a team sport, but time in and time out, Isaiah Thomas was able to defeat great teams, like the Boston Celtics and like the Los Angeles Lakers. And this was prime LA. This wasn't the LA that Michael faced. This was prime LA, still Showtime Running Gun LA with Prime Magic, and you talking about a great series, and they went 7 games and won that and lost that, but then came back the next year, and that's how you knew they meant business, because they came back the next year and swept the Lakers. I mean, swept them, and that is the reason why I got Isaiah Thomas in front of him. And also, if you think about it, John Stockton averaged 13 points, 11 assists a game, but Isaiah Thomas averaged 19 points and 9 assists a game. So you're talking about 8 more points a game, 5 or 6 more points a game, and only 2 less assists. And then you got to look at it. Isaiah Thomas is a 2-time Finals champion, 1-time Finals MVP, which could have been 2, but Joe Dumars had to get him 1, which he had a phenomenal series. But Isaiah Thomas' services wasn't even needed as much, as they just rendered the Portland Trail Blazers to be inadequate team to even be coming up against them. But even though they had a good team with Terry Porter and Kevin Duckworth, and but we know the story. So that's Isaiah Thomas for you, y'all. And then I actually have Isaiah Thomas tied with 8-1 Jason Kidd. And yes, I did say Jason Kidd, and I know earlier Jason Kidd, he played just as many years as John Stockton, so he has some longevity stats or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, I watched Jason Kidd's whole career, and you have to realize, even though he's number 2 in steals and even though he is number 2 in steals and number 2 in assists, behind John Stockton, I have to get a nod to Jason Kidd, because Jason Kidd led teams to the finals by himself. He never had a great player like a Karl Malone, ever. Jason Kidd, when he was with Jersey and took them to the finals twice, who did he have? Kerry Kittles, Richard Jefferson, Kenyon Martin. These are great players, but at the end of the day, he didn't play with not one Hall of Fame teammate. And as soon as he teamed up with a Hall of Fame teammate like Dirk Nowitzki, we saw what happened, and he won the championship. And everybody said he was over the hill when he won that championship, but he still was the one who was running that offense and still was playing good defense, and he was one of the key people that had a key role in getting that championship for Dallas against Miami in 2011. And you have to realize Jason Kidd, he gave you 13 points a game and 9 assists a game, kind of like Isaiah Thomas. And the reason why I have him tied with Isaiah Thomas, quite honestly, I would say Isaiah Thomas is really ahead of Jason Kidd. If I had to take one or the other to start a franchise with, I'm going to take Isaiah Thomas over Jason Kidd and John Stockton every single time. And it's not just all numbers based. It's based on, I've seen all 3 of them play their entirety of their careers, and that's who I would take. So even though I do have them at a tie, that was just for my list purposes because of the way my list was constructed, and I had to make sure that both of them were mentioned. But you have to realize the reason why I had Jason Kidd tied with Isaiah Thomas and over John Stockton too is because he does have the NBA championship, even though Isaiah has 2, and that's why they tied. But Isaiah doesn't have any all-NBA first-team defenses or anything like that. Isaiah Thomas, as a matter of fact, he had 2-time champion. He was a 5-time All-NBA, whereas Jason Kidd was 4-time All-NBA first team, 3-time All-NBA, 5-time All-NBA defense. And, I mean, if you 5-time All-NBA defense, first and second, I think 1-time first, then that's pretty damn good, especially playing, in at the point guard position. So that's the reason why I have him edged right there. But at the same time, he was a 5-time assist leader in the league. And like I said, he carried trash teams. I mean, he's kind of like AI, who I had him ranked up there. But you got to think, when you second all-time in assists and you second all-time in steals, then that's saying something. And I don't want to say the championship is what edged him out over John Stockton, but at the end of the day, I just feel like Jason Kidd didn't have the benefit of having a Karl Malone, because John Stockton pretty much his whole career for 15 years played with Karl Malone. Now, if you take a Karl Malone and you put him on that Nets team, you're talking about domination. You're talking about total and pure domination with the likes and somebody with the high IQ of a Jason Kidd. And I'll have to put the IQ of Jason Kidd up there as well. And that's particularly why you see him as a coach in the NBA as it is right now. But tell me, y'all, let me know what y'all think about my list so far. I think I brought my list. I think I have it with me right here, where I have, just to kind of get a recap, it was Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Reggie Miller, Allen Iverson, Giannis, James Harden, David Robinson, D. Wade, Charles Barkley, Dominique Wilkins, Moses Malone, which we covered today, Malone, KG, Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, and Jason Kidd. So definitely want to get in from 16 to 10 on tomorrow's episode of the Be New Daily Sports Show, which I'm trying to make more daily. But please believe, when the season gets started, we're going to be on this thing on a daily basis. So it's the off season, so just work with me right now. But I do appreciate everybody who watches the show in the entirety. I appreciate everybody who watches the show just a little bit. I appreciate everybody. So please like, subscribe, share. Let's get this show started. I'm about to throw a little theme song on here, but you know, like I said, I've been dealing with a lot of issues. You know, I still gotta work my job. I still got a lot of things dealing with my son I'm trying to take care of. So y'all just send positive vibrations to me, and as always, I send positive vibrations to you. And until next time, as always, man, right on to the real, and much love to the haters. I'm about